I'm Carol Reynolds, and I have the double delight right now of having with me the soprano, the brave, and marvelous soprano Lindsay Kesselman, and Mark Norman, the intrepid conductor of the Piedmont Wind Symphony. And something wild is going to happen when these two get together in just a little while. Welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is great. And I love your adjectives. Wow.
I do too. I'm going to put intrepid in my
I
bio
know,
somewhere.
brave. I'll take that. That's my favorite.
Well, I want, oh, you two really are. I mean, you're sitting there smiling and calm, but it's not going to be calm when this concert starts because of the piece and because of what it demands from both of you and from the ensemble. And rather than me talk about it, I would like you to tell us all about Mr. Tambourine Man and how you two linked up and anything you can, because this is the story.
Well, I tell you what, I'll start with just sort of the genesis of this idea. I heard Lindsay sing Mr. Tambourine Man with the Michigan State Wind Ensemble. Oh, I think it was 2013. And I immediately knew sometime in my future I was going to program this piece and have Lindsay come out and sing it. And Lindsay and I've done several things before, including last fall when we did Songs from the End of the World, the John Mackey piece. But I knew that this was going to be sort of for me a bucket list. Like I wanted to do this absolutely with Lindsay. And so we had the opportunity and we programmed it this year with Piedmont Wind Symphony, a professional ensemble that is doing this. And it is very demanding for the soloist and the wind symphony as well. But this was for me, like I said, a dream for me to have to come to fruition, and it's so great that this is actually taking place. And I really thank Lindsay for doing this. So
Oh, it is my pleasure. This is a really special piece, and I was just going to add another group of people to those upon whom demands are placed, and that's the audience. It really, this is a very dramatic arc that we take the audience on in terms of a story and the emotional commitment and vulnerability that is really required of everyone who experiences this piece. It's not a passive experience. We will reach out and grab you by the collar and draw you into this music and these texts.
absolutely.
Now, I'm sitting here remembering when Bob Dylan began. And the last thing you could have ever imagined is anything you just said, all right? And this piece has such an interesting genesis, being voice and piano, and then ensemble, now for a chamber ensemble, all of those layers we could maybe make reference to. But it comes down to this apparent fact that John Corigliano and Bob Dylan are contemporaries, and yet Corigliano did not know these songs and set these poems sort of from scratch, approaching them as a piece of literature.
Well, I'll let Lindsay go into the details because she's the storyteller with all this. But I would say that that's what really intrigued me about it when I first heard it. Were these were words I was familiar with. I knew these words. They were my parents' generation, but also part of my generation too. I mean, I'm in that crease, and so I knew these songs well. And so when listening to the text and hearing it presented in such a different musical fashion, and I mean, and no, this is not a slight on Bob Dylan whatsoever, but Bob Dylan's words are amazing, and to hear it sung by an amazing artist like Lindsay, put everything in different contexts, and of course with the music of John's music is just unbelievable. So for me, I think that's somewhat of the intrigue for the audience as well. These may be very familiar lyrics for some, and at the same time, Lindsay might be introducing the lyrics and the poems of Bob Dylan to a whole new audience.
And that's really the thing about great art of all kinds, right? Is that they are birthed out of the time that they were created, but then there is a certain timeless quality to every piece of art that is a true masterpiece. There are these layers of meaning that can be found, and there's a new relevance that can be found at any time. And I think the audience will find that these poems have just as much resonance now as they did when they were first written. And Bob Dylan is a truly extraordinary literary presence. And I think these settings that John Corigliano so brilliantly set give us a way to hear those words differently and maybe even more clearly because they're not attached to the original songs that are so familiar. So, I mean, it's just such an exciting way to participate with art, to remember that it's not a museum experience. It's a living, breathing, organic art form that grows and changes and evolves with the times. So sometimes I have to make sounds that are ugly or that are jarring or that are rough, or, because I think that's audience want to see performers who are human, and humans are not any one thing. And emotion, there's such a vast emotional landscape that we experience in our lives, and that needs to be reflected in our art. And this is like a case study, this piece in 35 minutes. I mean, we cover such a huge spectrum of emotion, and that is what the audience will come away with. They might not be able to hum all of the tunes, but it is so approachable because of the storytelling, and because it is so clear, how passionate Bob Dylan felt about these issues, and how there is such contemporary resonance for them today. And we go through this spectrum of whimsy and delight and joy and nostalgia and anger and ferocity and disbelief, and, all the things that I think our culture and our society goes through when there are major world events, when there's a pandemic. The first time, I've been really fortunate to sing this piece many times in all 4 versions. I think somewhere around 25 at this point. And that is a huge luxury for someone who does new music. Getting to come back to a masterpiece like this that many times just means that my relationship with it can be deeper each time. And every time I do it, there is a reason out in the world why these issues are ever present on people's minds. Issues of violence, issues of war and strife and turmoil and disconnection from each other. They're all right there. And so there's something new in the front of the audience's brain every time. I've done it the day after mass shootings have happened. The first time I did it after the pandemic, we're mid-pandemic, but after the shutdown reopened, was incredibly full of resonance, because it was so reflective of this collective experience and trauma that we had all been through as a society. But I mean, those are just a couple of examples, but every single time, which I just think speaks to the genius of both Bob Dylan and John Corigliano, who is turning 85 this month, by the way. And so this is a great time to celebrate him with this very, very, very special piece.